island of St. John is not just home to Virgin Islands National Park, it's also home to a community of people whose roots go back hundreds, even thousands of years. To teach me more about this long and complex history is Dr. Hadiya Sewer and Kurt Marsh, founders of St. John Co., a community nonprofit that's dedicated to preserving the history, identity, and culture of St. John. So, guys, who were the first people to arrive to St. John, and when did they get here?
So the Indigenous people of the Caribbean arrived in St. John thousands of years ago. And then they were followed by people who were understood to be a more horticultural people, also a community that made ceramics and had a very complex social and political and religious structure.
Besides what we're able to uncover at sites like Cinnamon Bay, when we're able to do archaeological digs and find shards of ceramics or pieces of bone and things like that. We also have, in the case of the Reef Bay Trail, petroglyphs, which are really unique identifier. Beyond giving us some sort of glimpse into some of these complex religious structures, it also just lets us know a little bit of how these people were as craftspeople too.
You have a couple ideas of what the petroglyphs could represent. They have faces that resemble bats as well as beings. And one of the things that we know about Reef Bay is that once the water gets settled, it becomes a space where bats tend to congregate. And bats were also special religious symbols to the Taino people.
Who were the first Europeans then to come here, and when did they get here?
So Denmark established the Danish West India and Guinea Company to authorize quote unquote trade. And so they make an effort to establish a settlement on St. John in 1717. European colonization, of course, was very, in many ways, totalizing and violent in the ways in which it established a plantation agricultural system, but also the violence against the Taino people, the nearby Indigenous people of other Caribbean islands, as well as the enslaved Africans who were brought here to labor.
Beyond just the occupation of space by Europeans, there's also the reality too that they suffered from disease, unfamiliar disease. By the time the plantation society was well established, most of the indigenous population had been wiped out.
In St. John, in particular, in early settlements, there was agriculture that focused on cotton and tobacco. And then Denmark really wanted to get into the sugar industry. And so we have the establishment and the building of the sugar mills that we actually still see dotted across St. John's landscape. And so sugar was produced on the plantation, in the sugar mill specifically. We understand that itself to be a brutal process in the sense that enslaved people could lose limbs and be harmed physically by the labor, but also just by some of the danger of the process of crushing the cane.
What were some of the factors that led to the end of the plantation system here?
So you had environmental disasters. You also had the multiple waves of resistance. And these two factors together created a period of economic decline. And so when the enslaved demanded their freedom, Peter von Schalten acquiesced.
So how did the transfer in 1917 from being under Dutch rule to being part of the United States, how did that change life on St. John?
A few interesting things happened. Denmark became interested in selling the then Danish West Indies to the United States of America, in part because they were seeing economic decline, especially in the aftermath of the waves of resistance that were taking place. There are some attempts in the early 1930s to start to shift the way of life in the Virgin Islands to boost the economy, to establish and increase levels of local governance and autonomy. In around the 50s, we start to see the culmination of these early efforts to improve the economy and the establishment of tourism and the subsequent desire to establish a park on St. John starts to emerge in this context.
How does your community, how did that impact your community? Because it sounds like there's a rich tradition of your connection with the land. How does a park that takes up like 60% of the island impact that tradition?
The ways in which some of these lands and estates were acquired to establish the park are very questionable, and it's sort of the foundation of a lot of the disconnection between many St. Johnian families, ancestral families, and the national park. Um, but beyond being facing a context where there's this sort of disconnect to what you knew to be your space, being disconnected from your deeply ingrained cultural roots has been one of the ramifications of the park being established. Um, and this isn't to say that there aren't opportunities for that to change, because there are. There just has to be a willingness on the part of St. Jonians and the national park to come together, leadership within the park to come together and start to talk about what a way forward could look like. Because a way forward that we all agree on and work towards means that there's a better future for everyone in this space.
So I'm a visitor to this island. What are some ways that I can come and visit and enjoy St. John in a way that's respectful of the culture that's here?
I would say to be mindful of how you spend your dollars. So whenever possible, try to visit local restaurants, stay at establishments that are owned by Virgin Islanders, and frequent establishments that hire Virgin Islanders.
I'd add to that by saying one of the things you definitely want to do, which seems to be something that's been lost among visitors over the past few generations, is connecting with people of this space. Try really hard to make connections with people here. I think they could make an amazing difference in your experience.
Well, guys, thank you so much. It's important that, parks not only preserve the natural history of places, but the human history, and it's been great to learn about your community. Want to learn more about our national parks? Then hit that subscribe button, friend. Stay up to date and catch bonus features by following us on Instagram @Outsider.